You're listening to A Creative Excuse, presented by Echo a Mano. This episode is with Chris Casey. He's a ceramicist based out of Albuquerque. Chris shows his work at Echo a Mano and has a very robust Instagram following and presence where he does all kinds of great instructional videos and is really transparent about his process. Check that out at Chris Casey Art on Instagram. And you can find his work at the gallery and on our website, echoamano.org. Up now at Echo a Mano is a group show featuring over 50 different artists called Regalos. Lots of small works, prints, ceramics, and jewelry. A lot of affordable pieces, great for gifting. And then after that, on December 27th, we'll be opening a show of works by Carlos Merida, featuring his Estampas de Popolva portfolio, which is kind of an illustrated version of the Mayan Codex de Popolva. Really cool prints, and we'll also have a selection of his work from Trajes Regionales. Hope to see you there, December 27th, 5 to 7 p.m. As always, thanks for listening, and make sure to subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks. Yeah, cool. Thanks so much for doing this.
Are we recording?
We're recording.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
Just jump in, man.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, totally. You had some car trouble this morning.
Yes. Come back from vacation and find a flat tire on my car.
Do you have AAA and that kind of stuff?
You know, I actually do. I have one of the companies.
Yeah.
And I always forget. Honestly, I haven't really had much car trouble, so haven't had to deal with that. I didn't even think about that actually. But as far as a solution, I just changed it on my own, and then ended up borrowing my dad's vehicle, and so he's getting the thing fixed.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Your dad's cool. He's been really supportive. Like, he's shown up a few times, solo.
Yeah.
And be like, hey, I'm Chris's dad.
Yeah.
You know, it's awesome.
Yeah. I always say my dad is my number one art champion.
Yeah.
He's definitely. He's not an artist himself, but he, especially over the last 10 years or so, even 5 years since we started going to art openings, he's really come to enjoy going to art galleries, sort of be more open, not openly critical, but realizing that being critical of art is all right. And part of enjoying going to galleries and seeing art is sort of saying, oh, I like that. Oh, I don't really like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you ever engage with them in any further? Hey, what don't you like about that? Why don't you like that? Or why do you like that?
Yeah, for sure. That's something that I think he, it took him a while to sort of get used to being, somewhat negative against some art. He would be like, oh, we'd go see a show, and he's like, that's just, there's something about that. I just don't see, I don't understand what they're doing there. I was like, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's perfectly fine. That's what you should. Sometimes you like the art, sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, you don't like the art, and that's all right.
Totally.
That's part of it.
Yeah. And I think for somebody that hasn't gone through critiques, that can feel a little, I don't know, it might seem rude or something, to say oh, I don't like that, or that didn't do it for me, and here's why.
Yeah.
Because, in my experience, the good things that I picked up from critiques, I picked up plenty of bad things too, was getting me to think about, why things moved me and why they didn't, and it allowed me to get better at honing my skills, about and the same thing goes for for this gallery, right? So when I'm drawn to something, well, why? What's moving me about that? Like, and if I can kind of articulate it, even just a little bit, it helps me make better choices.
Yeah.
And it's the same as for making.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's like the, I don't know, it makes me think of like the slow food and cooking food for yourself and just like doing things for yourself, building things for yourself, that if you have to do it and you know more of the process, then you can appreciate it more. And the same thing with us, like thinking about the art that you're seeing. You're like, why? What exactly is drawing me to this? What's like, why do I think that's sloppy, or why do I think that's amazing? And it's like, if you really think about it, there's somewhere in your brain that you'll be able to like at least get some sense of why, what the reasons are. So as far as him, he's no critic or anything, but everybody has a thought on what they see, and
right.
He's starting to like really appreciate his thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think that kind of, I mean, that's self-discovery as far as I'm concerned. Like that, like learning about what moves me and what doesn't is teaching me about myself. For sure. It helps me understand where I'm coming from. And I think it's, of course, there's nothing wrong with just liking something and leaving it at that, but I think it just deepens the process. Right. And especially if you're a maker, I think it's almost imperative, really.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast on the way up here, one of the ones that, the last episodes of this show.
Oh, and, with Heather?
Yeah. And, just thinking about, I lost my train of thought.
Making and self-discovery and criticism. No. All right. So
I'm a little nervous.
No, yeah. This is easy. There's no, we're just flowing with it here.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Albuquerque, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was born in Las Vegas, New Mexico. Grew up in Albuquerque. I've been there since I was 3, so it's pretty much my whole life.
Yeah. And you said your dad isn't. Does he make other things? Is he a creative person?
He's definitely a tinkerer, and he's a very like hands-on kind of guy. He's not specifically. He's a jack of all trades, I should say.
Yeah.
He works in, like, he does some car stuff and some woodworking stuff. Actually, so he just retired. In June or July, into June. And now he's, finding out what to do with his time now.
Yeah.
And he's actually talking about, like, hasn't been an artist specifically, but now he has time. And, it's like I feel like the sort of classic retired thing is to be like, well, I'm going to do this creative thing that I never had a chance to, or didn't have the funds or the time or whatever before. And so now he's getting into, he actually started coming to my, I teach a ceramics class on Thursday nights at Coyote Clay. And so he's started coming to that class, and he's been there 2 or 3 times.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
So, yeah. So he's just like stamping out little things and like making, kind of like kitschy, like Christmas ornaments.
Yeah.
But like to him, it's all new. And so just dealing with clay, learning how it moves, the different levels of dryness and what you can get away with, mark making, that kind of stuff, is all new to him. So like he's having a great time.
That's awesome.
And that's, he hasn't even got like to the glazing or anything like that. So
right.
Yeah. So I'm excited about how that's going to go. He's also, I work at C&M, as a lab manager, and, I'm always encouraging him to take classes at C&M, because now he's a senior citizen and he's retired. So he can take classes for like super cheap, like $5.
Yeah. And the facility up there, I just visited you once over there. It looked amazing.
Yeah.
Like just really extensive.
Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful. It's awesome. Very well set up studio. But so I don't think he's going to study or like really go much into ceramics or clay. He'll go into, or I keep pushing him to go into woodworking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's sort of been like we used to go to this day camp a long time ago, and he was like the wood shop teacher. And so it's like I always associate that with him, and he has lots of like tools and stuff. And so
It's like a retired dad thing.
Yeah. One thing he'll get a kick out of this. He's kind of a scrounger, and so he like finds things and he like brings them home. And he in the last year or so found a place that repairs and I guess dismantles and destroys pianos. So he found this place, and like out back there's always either parts of pianos or like entire full pianos, and he goes over there and like takes them apart. And now he's been like stockpiling wood for the last months and months, and so he has a ton of all this like really nice finished wood around the house that like I'll go over to my parents' house and I'm like, what is going on here? There's like so much stuff. And so that's one thing I'm like, hey, you know what, you could take a class and then you could like build something out of all this stuff. And so I think that'll be
cool. I saw a performance a few years ago where a guy was destroying a piano with an axe, and it was really intense. It was kind of like about deconstructing like Western European culture. But anyway, but afterwards he let people just sort of pick up through the detritus and everything. So I found there's these piano hammers that look really cool. Those felt sort of thing. So I grabbed a few of them and I gave one to a buddy of mine who makes jewelry, and he made me a brooch out of it. And so I have this like piano hammer brooch. It's just it looks kind of like a mandolin almost. It's got a really neat shape to it. Yeah.
He actually brought one of those to the ceramics class on last Thursday. He's like, maybe I could make something with this and like model it off of that.
Yeah.
But that's one of those things that, you know, if you've never opened a piano or, you know, it's like a piece of an object. I was thinking also on the way here about like inspiration for my work and patterns and stuff, and gears and machinery is a lot like that. But that's a lot of things. Those you don't usually see that stuff.
Right.
It's always in the machine. And so the machine does a certain thing. The piano makes a sound. You wouldn't think that you could take it apart and find these like neat little objects within it. So
yeah, totally. Do you find is it easy for you to kind of step into that role as like teacher with your dad?
Yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, we have a good relationship. So, he is not the kind of guy who, we didn't have to like call him sir and like, you know, you know, and actually it's funny. When I was a kid, people thought we were like, adopted or something, because we would, even since we were little kids, we called our parents by their first names. And it was mostly because, well, I guess we found that we could get their attention easier by being like, hey, Louis, hey, Siri. And so, so anyway, we have this relationship that's like very, you know, equal.
That's cool.
So, yeah, and I think the teacher thing is like, you know, he's been coming to art galleries and stuff for the last, it's really been 6 or 7 years now that we've been going to First Friday all the time, or, you know, at as long as we can. And so talking to him about art, showing him different places, sort of explaining why, what the person was trying to do, or, you know, maybe give him some critique about that. Anyway, so that's our, I feel like we've already sort of have that relationship.
That's cool.
So
that's great. Yeah. Cause I can imagine with certain, you know, dynamics and different, you know, parent-child things, it could bring up a lot of weirdness.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I bet my mom would probably be a little bit different, because she's always been like the smart authority figure more so than my dad. So I guess, maybe that would be, that's funny. Maybe that would be a different thing. Yeah. But,
and what does mom do?
My mom is, right now she's a dietitian. She was I guess she's still a diabetes educator, but she's mostly a dietitian now for, she works for the state, for low income population. So basically just try to get kids more healthy. But she was a diabetes educator and a dietitian for 25 years before that. So so lots of health related stuff, but also very serious, you know, healthcare field.
Sure. Right. And then how did you get into, did you get into making ceramics before other creative fields, or was there a gateway drug?
Gateway drug? No.
Gateway art.
Gateway art. Yeah, gateway creative process. I don't think so. Nothing specific. The one of the first things that I was super excited about was at that same day camp. It was called Starfire. It was in the T. Harris Canyon. And they had the lanyards, the where you have 2 strings and you layer them. Mm-hmm. And me and my brother were super into that. That was a big thing. So that when I think
decorating your lanyard,
well, and just building them and combining different colors and stuff. And I think a lot of that was my first sort of creative thing that I thought was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. But then me and my brother were in art classes and took art in middle school, got into ceramics in high school. And so then it was just, pretty much from high school on was where I really took it seriously.
Yeah. It's funny, that sparked a memory for me. I not much of a collector right now, except, I guess this is my way of being a collector temporarily.
Yeah, for sure.
But when I was a kid, I collected, I would have a thing that I would get obsessed about, and it wouldn't last a super long time, but for a while I was collecting old Pepsi memorabilia. Oh, wow. And then I collected coins for a little while, and then I collected I had a thing, and I was like, oh, I'm going to collect these things. And then I would lose interest and move on to another different type of collection. And when you said that about the lanyards, I was like, oh yeah, it was it's a bit different than what I'm doing here, but it seems to be reflective of that tendency to want to be surrounded by a collection of things. Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
And that acquisitiveness, I think a lot of times we just want to get things, and then it's not that you need to have that object forever with you. It's just that you get it, you kind of cherish it for a little while, and then things break and you lose it. It gets worn out. It's like favorite pair of pants or whatever. It's it just wears out after a while, and so you just enjoy it while you have it. But it's probably a good thing.
Yeah, right.
And then as far as American consumer sort of culture, it's it kind of hinges on the fact that things don't last forever, which is bizarre. But
and what I remember too is I loved organizing them. I would organize them, and then my mom would give me those disposable film cameras.
Oh yeah.
And so I would line up my coins, or line up my Hot Wheels or whatever, and organize them by color, by size, and then take pictures of them. I was okay, that's a little bit like curating, I guess.
Yeah, totally. No, that makes me think when I was a kid, we'd play with micro machines or little cars, and I would, we'd always have 20 little cars each, and so mine would always be parked in a little garage, so they'd be all in a row, and I just So it's that behavior, I feel starts out pretty early.
Totally.
It's that organizing sort of mindset.
Yeah.
It's order just makes you feel better, I guess.
Yeah, that's funny. So you took your first ceramics class in high school?
Yeah. As a junior in high school, and only as I was taking all sorts of art classes. That wasn't necessarily my focus, right. But I just took ceramics as kind of on the whim. I didn't really know much about it, but turns out, throwing specifically, pottery was I always say I've only been a natural one thing, and that was throwing on the pottery wheel. And now I look back and I'm like, it's taken so many years of very dedicated practice to get to the level I'm at. But it was a thing that brought me, I guess it made me happy. It brought me peace, and it I understood the process, whereas I teach pottery, and so some people get it and some people don't, and some people can sort of get it eventually, and some people are just this is awful, and I don't want anything to do with this. And so for me it was throwing on the pottery wheel was just instant. I just loved it.
Yeah. Well, I think for myself, and I know for many people, it takes quite a while before you can even do anything.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I know. I mean, it took me weeks to be able to pull up a bowl or a cup, and you just to get a form. I mean, it was just like everything just turned into flopping things, you know. And it's like, and I think it was really frustrating. Yeah. And it took a little bit of tenacity to just like keep trying. You know, because you end up with such terrible results for quite a while in the beginning.
Well, and that's why you have to enjoy the process. If you don't enjoy the process, you know, then you really won't. You're not going to have a good time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the process. And also, I always say this as an artist. I'm not terribly good at planning things out or looking too far ahead in the future. But that's been to a benefit, but also, you know, it's like long term, you need to plan ahead. But as far as like my life as an artist, it's been like put your head down and just make stuff. Yeah. And that mentality gets you through sort of the roughest beginning parts. Mm-hmm. But you have to be willing to deal with the trouble at the beginning, which, you know, even me, I don't like dealing with, think about like, I always bring up like poetry as an example of something that I like. When I was younger, I would write some poetry, and I enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed writing it, but I knew my poetry was awful. And I don't feel bad about that. Yeah. But I did realize, I was like, you know, I see the level of quality this is at, and I also see how much work it would be to become proficient and good at this. And I was like, I'm not willing to do that. Mm-hmm. I was like, I'll let poets be poets, and I can do, you know, express myself in other ways. But that's not. That wasn't my jam.
Well, I've read a number of different things where, like, you know, people talk about how even if you're just making it for yourself, like there's, I guess, been scientific studies or whatever where they talk about, you know, even if you're terrible at it, how beneficial it can be for your mental health to just be making something. Yeah. You know, even if you don't have to share it with anybody, mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be good, but just like the act of like making something, even if it's bad poetry, can be really beneficial.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, I guess there's that cathartic sort of aspect to it. And I encourage anybody to do that, and not to be self-conscious. That's, you know, that being self-conscious stops you, especially early on. That's not good. Yeah. To kind of get your like little soul crushed. But I mean, I think it's fun. It's just, but it's also a certain amount of resources that we have, and so. You know, it's like I could either practice my poetry or I could like do this other thing or that. Yeah. And so, you know, I actually thinking about like how I developed as an artist. My example I always bring up is I was up at like 1 or 2 in the morning working on a project for a 3D design class, and a long time ago, 10 years ago, and I was sitting there and I was like, what am I doing? I should go to bed. Like, why am I sitting here working on this when I should be sleeping, or I should like not be so focused on this thing? But I was like, I really want to get this project right. I really want to get it. You know, I had a vision and I wanted to get it done that way. And I was like, well, maybe I should study art, considering, you know, I had biology and math and stuff. And I was like, I'm not doing that for those classes. Mm-hmm. I'm not sitting around like dedicated, staying up all night doing, you know, 10-hour practice sessions of those things. But I will do that for art and certain types of art. And so, you know, it's like you got to listen to your
that's a pretty good signal.
Tendencies.
Yeah, that's a pretty good signal. Yeah. You said it was pretty kind of instant. Was it instant when you got on the wheel? You're like, oh, this is cool. I like this.
It was, yeah. I mean, I definitely didn't. If you could take me back to, this was 2004, when I was a junior in high school, and tell me the path that it would take me on, there's no way. I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
Sure.
But yeah, for sure, it was something that just like immediately had a draw for me. Mm-hmm. It was interesting to me right from the beginning. But I also sort of took it from, I didn't know much of the history of pottery or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really know much about that. I knew that it was like the immediate process of it was kind of fun to me.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. And you got into sculpture quite a bit too, right?
Yeah, that was mostly in college. I transferred over to UNM after going to CNM for a while, and and doing clay sculptures and wood sculptures and welding was a lot of fun. But yeah, mostly I studied, or I like built clay sculptures, these kind of like large abstract forms that, and they were these big, they were bright colors. They were like 2 feet by 2 feet ish size. So they were sort of on the larger side. So I did that while I was in school, and haven't done it as much lately, but I'd like to get back into it for sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Because you seem super focused on it. I don't know. I mean, on one hand, like I see how, like your work is undeniably yours, but yet you seem to be constantly experimenting. Like it seems like you have like this kind of ability to both like really hone in on a particular style or way of doing things, yet also, it seems like you're also experimenting all the time.
Yeah. Well, you can't be stagnant, even though I have some of the critique I've gotten is that like they're like, all right, you're good at what you're doing there. What are you going to do beyond that? And so there is part of my mind that's always feeling like that. I think that's just how it is. I think you just get bored with certain things, and that's probably the main thing is that you just get bored. You feel like you get to the end of an idea or the end of a medium, or honestly, the main thing that's sort of affected what I make and how I make it is the studio or the location that I'm working out of. So, like my first major production was out of the UNM ceramic studio. And so I spent so many years there and just made tons of work out of that studio. But it has a certain, they have a certain kiln, or they have like 3 or 4 kilns, these large kilns that you can fire big sculpture in.
Right.
And it's easy to load, and they're gas kilns, so you can load them. They're front loading like a refrigerator, not like a top loading thing, which it's harder to get these larger objects in there.
Right.
And so once I left UNM, then it's just harder to make that kind of work. Right. And then I was at Coyote Clay, which is a sort of a small community studio company, and they only have top-loading electric kilns. And so it's like you could – it's a community studio, so there's lots of people's work, and so you can't really like hog the kiln.
Right.
And if you did hog the kiln, people would get mad, or you just wouldn't have even have the opportunity just because they have such a production to go through. So I really stopped making the large sculpture back then and focused on the pottery.
Do you think if you had access to those, you'd be doing that sculpture still?
Yeah. Yes, I do. I right now I have access to a kiln that's decent sized. But in the meantime, and this is like an interesting thing that like I'm not sure. It's like you realize you're doing something that you have to take a step back and look at it. And the focus on pottery, I think, has come from a place where I know where the pottery's going. Like it's functional pottery. So like especially cups and bowls and stuff. It's like I know that even if people don't like the way they look, they can still use it as a bowl or a cup. Like it still has a function. It still has a purpose.
Use this ugly bowl.
Yeah, right. It's like it'll still hold soup.
Yeah,
so,
right.
So like that to me, I'm more drawn to that because it's like a concrete use.
Yeah.
Whereas sculpture, especially like large abstract sculpture, is just hard. It's hard for people to get into. It's hard for people to, especially when it's larger. It's like hard to literally find a place in your house to put it.
Hard to eat soup out of?
Yeah, there's not much. It ends up being a coat rack, honestly. Right. And if you go to my parents' house, they have a bunch of my old sculptures, and like there's literally a couple coat racks or like things that hold old like blankets and stuff.
Yeah.
And just but that's the thing is like they're these large objects that they don't have an express purpose, and the practical thing in every day is just like, oh, you could just set like a pile of newspapers on that.
Well, it's interesting to think about like artwork size as a function of like accessibility and like who can own it and afford it and have the space to show it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because if you have like whatever, like a 16-foot bronze sculpture, right? Who can buy that? And who has the space to put it in there? Not very many people, right?
Yeah.
So you're limiting it to the ultra wealthy, you know, and like with a even a whatever, like a 3-foot ceramic sculpture, you know, I mean, you have to have some space to really let that breathe, right?
Yeah.
So you're talking like a big house, a museum, or a big gallery, right?
People's yards.
Oh, or a yard. Yeah, I guess, you could always put it out in the yard.
Yeah,
Why not?
yeah.
So, yeah, that's interesting to think about that as a function of accessibility and like who gets to own artwork.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because it makes me think of the path that I went down to make those large sculptures. Was I had made this body of work in a certain style in one of my early ceramics classes at UNM, and I had spent all this time, months and months, working on these, like, I think it was like 8 or 10 pieces. Mm-hmm. And then critique came around and the response was like pretty ho-hum. Uh-huh. They were like, oh, yeah, okay, those are nice. Good job. Okay, on to the next. And I was like, I spent so much time on this stuff, and it's just like, it didn't elicit any response. And now I would probably have a different reaction. Mm-hmm. But my reaction then was, oh, this is like small pottery. Pottery's not interesting to people. It's on a small scale. I was like, all right, I'm going to build these large, giant sculptures, and they can't ignore them. They're going to be so big and they're going to be so bright and colorful that that people will not be able to not like comment on them. And I think that's like that ego thing that I was like, fine, then I'm going to make something that like throw it in people's face. Yeah. And so then I was making those for so long, and there's a couple aspects to it that like. I really enjoyed making the work. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of fun, and it was. I feel like there's still so much to sort of explore in that world. But I realized I had this show downtown with a friend of mine, a classmate of mine, that she did paintings and I did the sculptures, and so like I had 12 large sculptures that probably weighed, I don't know, 40 or 50 pounds each. They were painted with this paint that was kind of like it was kind of delicate, so you had to be kind of careful with them as you transported them. And so I set up the show. That was a big to do. It was my honors thesis for college, and so it was just a big to do and the end of this like long road. And then a month later, the show went great, and then a month later, it was coming down. And it's like that's one thing that I think as an artist, like you. That's something that no one talks about, and like no one like warns you about, like when you you dedicate your life and you spend so much time to make a show, and then it comes down. And I guess ideally you would kind of like sell the work. That would
sell
be nice.
It all, right?
But this was it was not a sales gallery.
Yeah.
Anyway, we didn't sell anything.
What the hell do I do with all this sculpture?
So I had all these sculptures, and it's like. Yeah, so they all just went around my parents' house, and now they're in the yard, and they're just all around. And you really come to appreciate the real, true physical nature of sculpture when you have to carry them around town and like pack multiple vehicles full of sculptures, and they're in the driver's seat with the seatbelt on them and stuff. So that sort of like that impulse to make that large sculpture was then tamped down by like the reality of like. Where do you sell these things? What do you do with them? They're these big objects. I guess you could like drive out to the west side or drive out into the woods and like leave them in the woods somewhere. They could be like like
surprise art.
Yeah. Which that's kind of interesting also. But it's like what do you do with these things? Yeah. And so that open-ended question I think led me back to pottery, where it's like. Well, what do you do with a bowl? You could eat out of it. All right.
That's right.
Simple. It's like it's not,
That's right.
It's a much simpler solution.
Yeah, right.
Or much more clear solution.
Yeah, that's cool. Something you said earlier about, not always being able to look under the hood or seeing the mechanics of something. It reminded me of the way that you use Instagram. Like, because what you're doing is you do a lot of videos that show the process. We got people trying to get into the gallery right now. We're closed. and you open the hood right into your process a lot.
Yeah.
Do you find that and you're very active there? Do you find that there's a collaboration between the people that follow your work there? Maybe not collaboration, but what do you get from that feedback, that kind of relationship that happens on social media? Because I feel like you're doing it in a way that's like super positive and not just like what I get tired of with social media is all the arguing and like just this real easy way to like vomit your opinion and leave.
Yeah.
Where you're like sharing a creative process. How does that come into your work and that feedback there?
That makes me think of on the way over here and all this morning, I listened to there's like impeachment things going on.
Yeah.
What do they call it? Trials or testimony.
Mm-hmm.
And it is. I mean, it's if you care about politics, it's pretty interesting. It's maddening, but anyway. So like I think of that stuff, and I've never made political art. I've never made any sort of art like that really has much of an overt message, because my reason for making art is pretty escapist. That I enjoy the process.
Yeah,
I do things that the process to me is a way of like sort of escaping, meditating, just a moment or hours of like kind of peace where I don't have to consider all the things in life that are like overwhelming and terrifying. And so as far as like how to use Instagram and using just showing the process, that's how I live what I enjoy. And so I just show that. And I think it's funny because it happens to turn out like satisfying and people are, interested in the process. But really, it's just a matter of documenting it and then presenting it in a way that's not as unadulterated as possible. That's sort of like my mantra is like, I don't want techno music on it.
Yeah.
I don't want flashing lights. I don't want, I actually don't even want
techno pod.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you see these like compilations and it's like, poof, poof, just crazy. And so I don't even want things to be sped up or slowed down because I feel like, if there's sort of a story to tell, the story is, this is literally what I'm doing to make these things. And it takes this much time. And Instagram's kind of nice because it's 1 minute.
Yeah.
With Instagram TV, it's a little bit different. But it's 1 minute. And, I feel like even if you're the most impatient person on earth, you can sit through 1 minute of something. Uh-huh. Even though 1 minute can really seem like a really long time. Uh-huh. If what you're watching is like just awful or boring or whatever, like it really can seem like a long time. So it's an interesting thing. I've seen processes where a minute is like not nearly long enough to get a sense of what you're actually doing. Like throwing like a 2 foot tall vase or something that it takes more than 10 minutes or something just to center the clay so that you can start throwing. So just showing that like genuine process, means a lot to me, and I don't like to really engage in politics, even though I care very deeply about what's happening, and but I think my guiding light is my philosophy as an artist is that I am here because I don't have I'm not speaking about like refugee crisis or some sort of other human suffering directly, and I just talk about like our inclinations. It's just not my inclination to do that. It's not my. Honestly, I make art to get away from all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't really want to talk about that stuff as I make my art, and so it ends up. I feel like my role is to distract, and distract is not doesn't sound like a positive word, but like entrance or entertain people who do deal with these really difficult things. I feel like it's my role, and if I'm doing my best job, people who do serious stuff, like I get messages from like, it's like, oh, I'm a nurse and my job is so stressful, and I find your videos and I can just kind of chill out and watch them, and they really help me to relax. Like,
oh, that's cool.
So I have some function in their life, even though I'm not doing any of that work. Yeah. I'm just allowing them a moment to kind of take a breath. Right. And I feel like that's important. And as far as like creative people and artists, the value of art is like really intangible. It's hard to say what it is and if it has any value at all.
Sure. Do you find that like that the feedback from, the people that follow your page and the people that interact with the videos, does that influence what you do at all? How does that relationship come into the work? Because there's a lot of, it's like 200,000 people. It's kind of crazy. Like, so you have a big audience. How does that come into play with the kind of end result, or does it?
I think I try not to let it affect me. Mm-hmm. It does, though, that we're all like social creatures, and so when you post something and it just like bombs, you are like, oh, maybe I won't post that again. Yeah. My in my most positive mind, my reaction would be something bombs and just doesn't do well. I'm like, oh, there's something about the way I presented that, and say different processes, like throwing or carving or something. There's a really bad way to present it, maybe bad lighting or the focus or the composition of the frame is off. And there's a good way to do it. And so now I try to, if I truly like an idea, I'm like, I really want to show this aspect of the process. I'm sure there's a certain way to do it. So, but then there's some things that I just don't really show. Like, I tend to sand my work very lightly with emery cloth, which is kind of like sandpaper. And that would make a really boring video because there's no like visual change. And this goes into like knowing how to like tell a story, and even with something abstract, like a carving, carving on a cup or something. There is a story there because there was the before and then there's the after. Right. And so the process is the in between. And so if anything, I've found that like I try to focus on those things where there's like a clear change. Right. There's a contrast between what it was and where it is afterwards. And so, some things don't really translate into video. Other things do. I'm always surprised. That's why I think it's all just so baffling, because there's things where I'm like, I'm showing this part of the process and people are just going to be so bored, or like, this is not interesting. This is so unlike the other things I do. And then like might be super duper popular. And I'm like, I don't understand. Yeah. I don't understand how this works, right. How things get traction. My one philosophy is like, just produce a lot of videos, produce a lot of work, document a lot of things. And even if 1 out of 20 is successful, it's like you still got that 1 out of 20. Yeah, right. So I think that's just in general making work, anything creative, that it just takes a lot of production, and some small percentage of what you make should be pretty interesting stuff.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think you ask most artists, and editing is a huge part of making work. I mean, especially I was a photographer in college, and you even with film, you're shooting a lot. I was shooting a lot, and the real kind of a lot of the creative, more conscious processes were done in the editing. Because when I shot, I wasn't really thinking too much about it. It was very, just kind of split second, make the decision, shoot the poke, move on, shoot, move on, shoot, move on. And then, in terms of like, okay, what's good or what do you present? It's going back and pulling out what doesn't work, and thinking about, okay, well, why is this successful? Why is that not successful? Back to that sort of critique, is that editing.
And you hope that editing process can stay true to your sort of vision. I guess you're kind of lost if you're producing stuff that is not interesting to yourself. But otherwise, if you're somewhat adaptable, I was thinking about this on the way up here also. excuse me, the idea of making art in a void, and there's like a certain threshold, I think, that artists can, you have to follow your own vision, you have to, blaze your own path and like have your own voice and stuff. But the reality is, like, you're not making art by like in a void, and you're not making art as a guy in a cabin in the middle of the woods.
Unless you're a guy in a cabin in the middle of the woods.
and that the thing, and then the thing with that guy is that no one ever sees his work.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if that's how he wants to sort of live his life, that's cool. But most of us are in society and we want to be part of society. And so, the idea of a sellout, it's like, oh, you sold out and you lost your credibility. But a lot of times what we think of as selling out is someone doing maybe something that like going down a path that was like too obvious, or I guess selling out is kind of an interesting thing. But it's also, you can modify your vision to what's popular. If you make a certain artwork or some sort of creative output and everybody's like, whoa, that's awful, or that's not interesting at all, then you modify it, because we're social creatures and we listen to each other. And so I think that comes into the videos and in the art, the pottery. I don't know, it all is affected by that outside sort of influence. And I guess the whole point is that you just try to keep your some kernel of some anchor in your own world. And for me, that's process.
Well, especially, I mean, if you're trying to sell the work.
Yeah.
And, if you're showing it in any capacity, it's all about, there's a relationship there, right? And I think that I know that I'm sure there's artists out there, you read about them and they're idealized and maybe even like fictionalized. This idea that like, as an artist, you're supposed to have your own vision, perfect it, put it out there, and who gives a fuck what anybody else thinks, right? And there is a certain level of truth to that, right? Because I think you have to really do something that does resonate with who you are, and something that is honest and sincere, right? That's totally, I think, important. And otherwise, I think you do get into a sort of, maybe more real definition of what selling out might be. Yeah. When you're doing something that, and this is no judgment, like, people got to eat, right? Yeah. I've definitely known artists that are just doing one thing and they hate it, but it sells and they need to pay their bills, right? Yeah. And that's fine. And, but it's not necessarily art. And I think for me, what I do is a lot about relationships. If I was showing, printmaking from Oaxaca and nobody liked it, nobody bought it, I'd either be out of business or I wouldn't do it anymore. Yeah. You know what I mean? I really like it. Well, then I'd be like, okay, well then I guess I need to find something that I like and that other people like too, so I can keep this gallery open, know? Yeah. So it's a balance, man. It's a real balance. And I think it's that give and take. And like, for me, that's where the satisfaction comes. I don't want to make, I don't want to do things like this in a vacuum. I don't want to just like, put myself up on a wall and be like, hey, worship me, worship my ideas. Yeah. I want that feedback. I want that back and forth,
Yeah, the stubborn artist, I think, where you just don't listen to anyone, is like an unsuccessful artist, probably ultimately. Yeah. Unless you're just that like super genius that is, one in a million. But otherwise, it's like, you have to interact with people. And I mean, the idea of curating to me seems like an overwhelming task. Like how to bring in, like, I'm hard. It's difficult enough for me to like corral my own impulses and like my own thoughts, let alone 10 or 15 artists' thoughts together and like communicate with them, and just like, it sounds really difficult.
It's funny. I mean, you think about just how many artists do you like, right? And you take that and you're like, okay, I have 450 square feet. Yeah. How many of those can I show? Yeah. And how many pieces of each artist can I show? And it's, and I tend to be kind of a people pleaser kind of person. And so it can be hard for me to say no sometimes. But I'm getting better, and it's a little easier to do it, when your own money is on the line.
Right.
Like, I think I've become a little bit more discriminate about, what I can and can't do. I don't know. It is kind of intuitive for me. Like, I feel like I have this, I hesitate to call it a vision, but it's more like a feeling of like, okay, this is kind of the feeling I want to create. And like, when I see work, it either sparks that or it doesn't.
Yeah.
Right. It
Yeah.
either kind of like flicks that switch or it doesn't. And I try not to spend a whole lot of time thinking too much about it. And because I've come to sort of trust a little bit that I can follow that. Not that it's right all the time.
Yeah.
There's always room to like grow and change and improve, but like that's kind of like the thread that I follow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that intuition.
Yeah.
I think that's important for sure. And I guess it's like, let your intuition sort of be a like gravity, and then you can kind of navigate along with it. Cause it's you're always going to be drawn to what you like.
Yeah.
But, and you want to produce like art that you want to produce, but you can also listen to other people and find a sort of happy medium between the two.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. And I think, if anything, most people I feel like don't follow their intuition enough. They don't, or they don't delve deep enough into it. Just do like surface level work. And so, it's like I always tell people starting out in creative art, ceramics, that like whatever weird aspect of your personality or who you are is like, if you think you're a weirdo or something, it's like, yeah, you should dive into that, because there's probably something interesting there that like that's more unique to you than to other people. And if you can like sort of draw that out and show them without like destroying yourself, then that's a good thing. And that's like fertile ground to mine for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think in general, our culture tends to lean into conformity, right?
Yeah.
That like conforming, and I mean, honestly, almost all societies do, because that's how you become a good citizen, is by adhering to the ideals and concepts that make you an American, or whatever the case might be, right? And so there's a real strong gravity in that pull towards conformity and getting the approval from the masses or your friends or whoever, right? And so to do something that that could feel against that or feel so different from that, it takes practice, right? And like kind of almost like course correcting your own tendencies towards conformity, right? It's a process.
That makes you think with Instagram, there's the text portion, the caption underneath, and I got to a certain level of traction where I started getting really self-conscious. I realized I was like starting to freak out and not wanting to write anything there, because I was like, oh, if I write something that sounds dumb or it's misspelled, or I come out, how will you come across? I was like starting to worry about that. And I had to kind of have this like conscious talk with myself where I was like, okay, you either just put it out there and you say what you want to say, or you have to just stop, because censoring yourself and not being able to say the things that you want to say, I don't know, it's like there's a little death. That being said, I don't talk about like politics and stuff, so it's like there is some censoring, but as far as
that's
like,
not what you want to talk about on Instagram. It's not the most conducive place to talk about politics.
The internet
really. It's terrible.
I grew up on the internet, and it's a terrifying place. That's honestly as being more of like a quote unquote public figure, or having people like see what I'm doing, and then they I get like scam emails and stuff like that. It's terrifying.
Yeah,
people. Right. There's a lot of like sharks in the water on the internet. So yeah, kind of funny.
Can you think of like an artist or or a piece of art or even an exhibition where you saw it and it either changed the direction of your work or changed the way you looked at art in general? Something that was just kind of like a big aha moment, an artist or an exhibition or something.
I think I'm still processing sort of my thoughts of this, but Anish Kapoor and Katerina Fritsch are two artists that have very different work, but they both use color as a prominent sort of aspect of their work. And especially, like I say, when I was making that show years ago, all the sculptures were these like big abstract forms in bright colors. So they were the whole rainbow essentially, but each one was just one solid color, and that came directly from Anish Kapoor and Katerina Fritsch, because they both do these like solid color things.
What about that stoked you? What about that kind of let you up?
I think of color as sort of in musical terms, that like color is, I don't have any sort of synesthesia or anything like that, but color is like there's a whole symphony in color. Line, and the way I work, which is very linear graphic sort of based, I think of sort of as lyrics, and like color is the music behind the lyrics. And so, it's like how you can have like a major key, a minor key, and they have just vastly different sort of impacts as far as like, a happy song, you put in a minor key, which is just a change of a few different notes. It has a whole different feel. Same thing with like, if I have a vase that's bright blue, has a certain feel. If it's bright pink, has a certain feel. I mean, and then it goes into like social things where it's like, you have a bright pink vase that, some people are like, oh, what's that? There's like a statement. And it can just change so much, and it could be the same exact object, same exact design, form, whatever. But just the color can shift it into a different place. With potters, they always talk about like craft fair blue, and like there's certain colors that people are just drawn to at fairs, and just in general. And so I made, like I was telling you, I had this show a couple years ago that was called Primary, and so I had bright yellow stuff, bright red stuff, and bright blue stuff, and all the blue stuff sold, some of the red stuff sold, and then I had a bunch of yellow stuff left over, and I was like, what is it with this yellow stuff that people just don't like yellow? Like, what? I thought it was really interesting, but the contrast isn't there, and it has to do with like the contrast of the carving versus the clay underneath. So with the blue stuff is real high contrast. The red stuff is kind of medium, and the yellow was lower. But still, I think it was mostly just about people don't like yellow as much. Like, people really like the color blue, and they like the color red. Yeah. Yellow is just a harder color, Yeah. I'm sure if you did some sort of like poll on what colors are people's favorites, there are some that would be high and some that would be low. It's like brown, I bet is probably not the most popular color for, like, I don't know, cars. You don't see too many brown cars. It's like blue's like always going to be pretty high up there.
Well, it's interesting to see like who really gets the yellow, right? Or whatever. You had a large yellow vase here, and the person that ended up, somebody actually bought it as a gift for them. It was his sister, and they came in together, and he just went bonkers over it. He was just like, "Oh my God, I love that! That yellow is amazing," And so there are those people that are going to get the yellow.
Yeah. No, and I think that's one thing I've learned for sure is that, especially when you use the way I use color is kind of, I don't want to be stuck in blue world forever and making just nothing but blue pottery. So I kind of had to force myself out of that years ago. And so now it's really just it's like, what do I have access to? And I have access to all the different colors. So I try to do, I kind of tend to do maybe 5 or 10 different colors, but I'm trying to branch out, Like I say, there's like a whole, like maybe what is it? A whole chord or something that I'm missing by not using these certain colors. So trying to expand, and then just in the last couple of years, I've been doing more polychromatic, multicolor pieces on the same work. Whereas before, for I don't know, 3 or 4 years, I was just making single color pots. So it's like if it was green, and the inside would match the outside. I did that for a long time, and I really enjoyed it. But the idea of adding a second color was kind of, I just didn't want to go into that world. And then a couple years ago, I was like, no, yeah, I'm gonna start doing this color combination thing. And it seems like such a small step, especially if you look at the work. It doesn't seem like such a big deal, but for me, that's when you start adding 2 or more colors, and then you get different textures, and you can have like glossy glaze versus the sort of matte underglaze. Like, it opens up a whole Pandora's box of possibilities that is awesome.
Yeah.
And so it's like, some people I feel like they're very good and dedicated to their like palette, and I'm like, I don't want to be stuck with one palette. I want to sort of have fun and explore these different things that can happen. So, and that has to do with also the surface decoration is all kind of improvised also. So,
well, I think that gets back to following the leads of what inspires you, right? In terms of the relationship between you and the viewer, right? Is like, that's what you're into, and you should do that. And another thing just popped into my head about like, finding your audience too, right? Like, I think like I think there's another sort of way of thinking about like, putting your work out into the world. It's like if you hit an audience that doesn't like it, like, you can adapt to that audience, and you can also find a different audience too. Yeah. Right. That's just another way of thinking about it. I think they're all kind of parts to consider in the whole thing, but it's like sometimes you just need a new audience.
Yeah.
But
I mean, if you can get your work in front of enough people, someone out there is going to like it.
That's right. Cool. So you can find your work here at Ochoa Mano.
Yes.
ChrisCaseyArt.com.
Yep.
Chris Casey Art is the Instagram handle.
Yes.
And any other shows, anything else coming up?
I have the New Mexico Artisan Market. That's at the end of this month, which I'm not sure if this
will come out in 2 weeks.
Okay. So it might be out.
But that date is.
so have that's just the market.
Where is that?
That is at the Hotel Albuquerque in Albuquerque. Just November 29th through the 1st of December. So it's
you'll miss it. So.
Okay. So as far as shows and stuff, I don't really have all that much. I'm working on just new bodies work, slipcast stuff, as you know. So that's a whole new realm to explore. Yeah. It's fun though.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much, Chris. I really appreciate you doing this.
Yeah. Thank you, Frank.
Yeah.